These were so funny.
Hello everybody.
It's Wednesday.
It's January, which means it's time for another Star Wars review. Before we really get into anything, we want to reiterate that this video will have spoilers in it.
Let's just start out with some general thoughts.
It wasn't my favorite Star Wars movie, but at least it wasn't The Phantom Menace.
On the scale of how much I liked it from 1 to 10, I would say that I'm at about a 6. We got some new characters who I really enjoyed. We got different situations that I really liked, but the story definitely had a lot going on, probably more than it needed to.
Definitely more than it needed to.
I loved Rose so much. And I didn't really have any idea what we were gonna get from her, just from like the marketing, because the marketing for her was pretty much non-existent. I really loved her and Finn's bonding time. The space casino was so interesting. It was something that we've never really seen before.
It's all about showing like the glitz and the glamour of rich people, but then like you see people like Rose who's like, these people profit off of really poor, often marginalized people.
And they're profiting directly by selling weapons to the Empire. But all of the stuff about like animal cruelty and like, you know, they're really bad because they're abusing animals. It was a little tired and it went on a really long time.
The Canto Bite scene just takes way too long. Maz Kanata could have easily done the job of the Master Codebreaker.
Wasn't it that Lupita is busy filming Black Panther?
Probably. At that point, do we need to bring Maz in at all?
No, we don't.
Benicio del Toro is a fine actor. He didn't need to be in this.
Maz sends them on this wild goose chase to find this dude in the casino, and we see that guy, and then he's never brought up again.
Nope.
And then they choose some random man they find in the basement, and lo and behold, he betrays them! Like, oh my god, who would have ever thought? I was like, this is the most, like, bad, not well-written fanfiction-y part. It also kind of felt like one of those ways in which they were trying to show that Rose was a really good person, but like, I didn't need to be convinced of that. It was clear to me from the very beginning that like Rose was a strong, principled woman.
Why doesn't Poe listen to Leia?
Why doesn't Holdo just tell Poe what's going on? Almost from the moment that we introduce Holdo, we're not supposed to trust her because she acts really shady.
Yeah.
After Leia and Holdo meet back up again and talk, it's clear that they've talked about him before.
They may have been like up late one night, like in bed, because they gay, but we'll get to that.
I was really disappointed that we didn't get more of them interacting.
The more that I think about it, a lot of the writing issues that I particularly have are issues because it feels like Rian Johnson was writing fan fiction. They don't necessarily follow the very strict Star Wars rules that a lot of the other movies have. Leia using the Force when she has never done it once before, and it's not something that particularly bothers me. It's just a thing that's like, Rian Johnson sat down and was like, this is a thing that could happen in this universe, right?
And it's not that it couldn't happen. It's not that it's unbelievable that Leia would be able to use the Force, because we know she's Force sensitive. We've always known this. Leia like uses the Force to like fly back into the bridge. It's not like she's using huge force powers, it's just for survival. I kind of expected this movie to give her a send-off in some way. I don't know what they've shot for the next movie, but she's gone.
They blow her out of the brig and I was like, this can't be it.
I was devastated.
Yeah, okay.
I was so upset.
I was like, this cannot be what they've done.
I was crying.
And then they had the whole Force thing come in and I was like, oh, okay, whew, good.
Especially because Kylo spent all that time deliberating, wondering if he was going to kill his own mother, and he didn't. And when he didn't, like, I actually kind of wasn't expecting him to do that. I like released that breath, and then immediately some stupid stormtroopers come up and blow her out of the sky, and I'm like, oh my god! I expected this movie to give her more of a farewell.
Rather than like her last line being like, what are you looking at me for? Follow that guy. I guess it's kind of possible that they pulled like a Philip Seymour Hoffman Hunger Games type thing where like the next appearance is CGI.
Which she won't speak.
Yeah, as long as it's respectable. I was a little rustled with the, okay, so I said in my other review that like the line that Luke says to her that no one is ever really gone.
That was a scene where like I was watching it and I was loving the scene and it was so sad and it was so well done and it was like these two characters that I love have been reunited and it really feels real. And then they say that line and I was like, God, why would you say such a thing? I felt like it was a goodbye scene between them. The moment that we've never seen in a Star Wars movie before that worked really well was her jumping the ship to hyperspeed right into their ship.
Holdo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was incredible. You don't want to go around sacrificing those gigantic ships.
Yeah.
At that point, nobody else is on the ship, so it makes a lot of sense for them to do that and for her to sacrifice herself like that. Another thing that made it really effective was like that silence that followed. It caught me off guard in a way that like kept me hooked in the moment for the entire time that it was happening. Sound doesn't travel in space.
Nope.
There were certainly some things where I was just like, this is literally just happening, because if it didn't happen, we would have saved like 40 minutes of this movie. I really just felt that way about like when we were back on the home ship.
The only times I ever felt that way with Luke is when, like, first with the titty milk, when he has the really long spear that he just like hops from one end to the other end of the little crevice thing, and then he like, and I guess he's like hunting, but I don't think I was particularly concerned with like how Luke has sustained himself on this island, because clearly he has.
I've seen some people complain about like the resistance he puts up to teaching her, because like we know he's gonna do it to some extent. I've just seen people say that it's like cliche, that it's just like Obi-Wan, it's just like Yoda, and I mean,
I guess, but like at some point in their Jedi careers, each one of them has realized how wrong the Jedi are.
Yeah.
Which is why the Jedi needed to end. I think we could have used maybe a little bit less of resistance from Luke just because of how long the movie already is.
For the most part, I felt like the stuff that happened with Rey and Luke, and even to an extent Kylo Ren, was paced pretty well, and there was nothing ever really that happened where I was just like, why is this happening? I thought the scene in the cave was really interesting with Rey. Though it got kind of surreal.
I'm still trying to process like what I was supposed to get out of it necessarily.
I'm not saying that I like liked the stuff with Kylo Ren and her. I liked that he was so utterly destroyed. Now that she's given him that chance once, she's never gonna let him do it to her again. Even though Snoke was encouraging it, I feel like we needed to explore that avenue to an extent just so that it doesn't happen again.
But I just wonder like how much more I would buy into everything with Kyle if he hadn't killed Han. Even if Rey didn't know that he was the one that killed Han.
It did feel like that got brushed over a little bit quickly. I still think he feels conflict about it. Doesn't bring him back. I think Snoke senses that he feels conflicted about it. He encourages those feelings because Snoke knows that that is something, like that regret is something that Rey will hook onto.
She also somehow seems to think that just by bringing him back to the light, that is gonna fix all the problems.
Because Kylo Ren is like the face.
But he's also like a cog in the machine. I think we see that especially because we have somebody like General Hux who is a military man. So when we have somebody like Hux, we as audience members recognize that like while Kylo Ren is like technically a Sith Lord, he's still only one Sith Lord. They're still a militarized fascist group that wants to take over the entire galaxy.
But I can see where she would be like, yeah, but it'll certainly help our chances.
Yeah.
Earlier you were saying like, why is there just Jedi and Sith? Why isn't there anything in between? Kylo is Force sensitive. He's been trained with the lightsaber and he knows how to use the Force, and so is Rey. It's very aggravating that like that's how we define them. Like there's not like a neutral term to describe like what they do. Because like the Sith and the Jedi are the same. They just have different principles and different agendas.
Yeah, we kind of saw Billie Lourd a little bit in The Force Awakens. She's really just like the girl with the buns next to Leia because she's Carrie Fisher's daughter. She like has like an actual character. She's an actual part of the Resistance and you see her doing things with or without Leia. Yeah, I hope they keep her character, even if she's not a main character. I don't need her to be a main character.
Yeah.
But I want her to continue to be in the Star Wars universe.
Luke doesn't really die so much as he just like becomes at peace.
He does the Force Ghost thing. Speaking of Force Ghosts, okay, there is a fabulous video that Pop Culture Detective did about how the Jedi Order, whatever.
Yeah, the Jedi Order.
They kind of imbue toxic masculinity in especially young boys. The Force Ghosts come back in each one of these little trilogies to tell you like, yeah, fuck that.
We might have been a little bit off the road.
Yoda
there.
does it more often than anybody else.
Something that I really liked about Pop Culture Detective's video was that he wasn't saying that like George Lucas was trying to tell us that toxic masculinity is bad. This is clearly more rooted in the fact that George Lucas doesn't understand the Eastern philosophies that he's borrowing from. I really loved Yoda in this movie. He just looks better as a puppet. Luke goes through the same trials kind of that Yoda does. Luke's own journey as far as like trying to do good in the world with this whole Jedi thing, failing spectacularly and like seeing things corrupted that he loved and seeing things die, knowing that it was his fault. A lot of people had a lot of problems with the fact that like he isn't like a perfect little boy anymore that we saw like 30 years ago.
Yeah, let me tell you something about growing old. You get grumpy, especially when you make spectacular mistakes like for a split second thinking that you should kill your own nephew because he might possibly become evil, and by even looking like you're gonna kill your nephew, he becomes evil.
And knowing that it was all because of a moment of weakness on your own part. If he hadn't turned evil, Han might still be alive.
Yeah.
Of course it would make him think like, oh, I need to go back to those original tenets of like not caring about anything.
Yeah. The hubris of the like pure hero is believing that everything that they do is good. And when they realize that it is not always
they fall
good,
hard.
Yeah.
It's also just such a fundamental like human emotion of like when you fail, you
don't
want
do
to
anything
run
anymore.
away. When you're hurt, you want to close yourself off again from ever feeling anything because you never want to be hurt like that again.
And you
so,
don't want to be able to hurt other people,
Yeah.
especially when you're a hero.
That's probably one of the reasons that Yoda shows up in this movie, to remind us that like, this is what happens in the hero's journey. You will eventually fall. It was nice to see Luke be the authority figure and be the grumpy mentor for that whole time, and then have him like make this big decision to like burn the tree, and then have him go back to being the mentee.
I don't understand Snoke. Not that I don't understand his motives, because like
He never got started. He was built up to be this huge menacing
Yeah,
character, and then he got cut in half.
yeah, I don't need Snoke's backstory. I just need to know why I'm supposed to like fear him.
It felt like J.J. Abrams was building up to like the next movie of actually seeing Snoke like as a big player.
Yeah.
And then in this movie, we didn't get Snoke as a big player, and then he dies. He's obviously a very powerful Force person. I think he displays some like terrifying power, but we see him display it in about 5 minutes and then he's dead. We don't spend enough time with him for us to really even get a sense of like the role that he plays in the First Hux is hilarious in the sense that I really enjoyed watching him get tossed around like a rag doll.
Yeah.
He's a shouty baby in Force Awakens.
Yes.
He's even worse in this.
Yes. I'm still like, okay, so he's got the military power, but what else?
What else is there?
There was some really decent humor in this movie. There wasn't as much as I was kind of hoping for. I was really looking forward to Poe and Finn hanging out more, and then nope, we split them up.
Finn naked leaking bag, the gayest line ever said.
In the Star Wars universe?
Ever. Period.
What about the conversation between Holdo and Leia?
Finn naked leaking bag.
Why is he wearing a water bag?
Because Rian Johnson doesn't care about space rules.
I really liked Rey. I really identified with her.
I do want to say that like I tend to like Abrams' writing for Rey more than I like Johnson.
He seems to write her with a bit more self-assurance.
Yeah, and a little bit less naivete. There was also a lot of, I call it Reylo fodder, because it's not necessarily canon Reylo, but it's stuff that the Reylos can grab onto immediately and say like, look, this is our evidence that this is happening, when it's not. But that had to do with the writing.
Beefcake Adam Driver scene.
Yeah.
I feel like Rian Johnson saw the Undercover Boss skit and was like, Adam, you gotta get shredded.
Yeah.
That was a thing that felt very fanfictioning. It wasn't even like immediately after he's like shirtless, she starts thinking like, goo goo eyes.
I'm pretty sure that's when she like accuses him of murdering Han Solo.
Yeah.
And being like, why would you kill your parents? She cannot comprehend why somebody would kill his own parent.
I think that they needed to explore it, especially because there was such a fan response to Reylo. The
different
idea of
writer.
redemption through love is a thing that happens and has happened in the Star Wars universe before.
Yeah, I kind of wish a different director or writer, one or the other. Doesn't
I
have
definitely
to be different
agree
for
with that.
both, but
it was incredibly baity. The hand scene made me so uncomfortable.
Oh God, yeah.
I really did love where like Luke comes bursting in like a parent and like a chaperone on a middle school field trip. Make room for the Force Ghost.
Yes. Okay, so something that it kind of bothered me was like the lack of Chewie. We don't get any kind of mourning scene from literally any character over Han, but especially not Chewie, who's been with Han since before every other character in the movie.
And like maybe we didn't necessarily need Chewie mourning, but I would have liked a little more Chewie.
Yeah.
I did think that it was a bit silly that Finn was like, I'm gonna sacrifice myself for the rebellion.
I didn't think
What?
that part was an issue that I had.
I more had a
It
problem
wasn't-
because I thought up until the very last second that they might actually kill him.
Yeah, that there was
I
that.
was pissed.
The kiss between Rose and Finn.
I thought it was cute.
Like, I didn't have a huge issue with it like a lot of people did, but I also didn't interpret it as her being like, I'm giving you a romantic kiss.
It felt a lot more like a kiss as a gesture of tenderness and emotion rather than as an act of romance.
Yeah, it's a weird choice for that moment, I will admit, but I wasn't like bothered by it.
I kind of go both ways. Rowan suggested that it would have been much better if like Poe had been the one to stop him, but Rowan also argued that like It would have made a lot more sense for Rose to feel like, my sister made this sacrifice, I'll get to be a rebellion hero, this is something that I should do.
And then if Finn knocked her out of the way.
And then Poe knocks her out of the way, and that kind of completes Poe's arc of like learning that just because you sacrifice yourself doesn't mean that you've saved the day.
I have a few questions. What was the message? Anti-war? Anti-fascism? The Jedis are wrong?
Old ideas have to move on and have to die for there to be any kind of new growth. Kylo seems to understand that, like that's why he kills Snoke.
Throughout most Star Wars movies, if not all of them, there's also like the theme of hope. The only thing is this gets very bleak.
And we're bleak almost the entire way through, except at the very end.
They send out a signal when they get to Crate and nobody answers it. We got like 20 people and a couple of ice foxes left.
Then again, we don't know how much of the First Order was destroyed. That's a problem though. They've kind of put themselves in a corner. Like, it'll be interesting to see what they do next because we're kind of ending on like a depressing note.
My favorite part of this entire movie is at the end when Finn and Rose show up and Poe is like, Finn, Rose, where's my droid?
My favorite part was like the joke where she was just like, what are you gonna have me do, lifting rocks? And then at the very end, she's just like, lifting rocks. I felt like this movie did a really good job of making sure that it didn't reference too much of the previous movies, but also like paying the proper attention and respects to what was there, except for when Admiral Akbar was just being murdered. I feel like The Force Awakens needed to kind of pay that homage.
Still not enough Phasma. Gwendoline Christie deserves so much more. I am so simultaneously turned on and so terrified of Phasma.
I thought the showdown between her and Finn was spectacular.
Oh yeah.
I could have gone another minute or two. I'm interested to see like what they do next with Kylo's character because now he's basically been the exact same character in both movies.
Now I'm interested to see what Star Wars is like without any Skywalkers.
Yeah.
Except Ben. I guess our theory that Rey's parents were Luke and some lady, it's not a thing.
I know you don't particularly like this theory, but I watched The Force Awakens right before I went and saw The Last Jedi, and the scene where she grabs Luke's lightsaber and she like sees all of those flashes of memories, there's a moment where we hear Ben Kenobi's voice saying, take your next steps, Rey. And I was like, oh my god, I've never noticed that before. And he calls her by her name, and I was like, oh my god.
That doesn't make any mathematical sense.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter, he's too old.
It doesn't matter.
He's way too old, and he's dead.
But Force Ghost, maybe.
Force Ghost cannot have babies. But Rey
I said maybe. I kind of liked the fact that her parents were nobodies. I think Rey doesn't need that anymore. I was a little disappointed that Luke was not her dad. If they'd turned out to be cousins, I would have loved to have seen all of those Reylos scramble to say how cousins really can love each other very much. Kelly Marie Tran. I'm so happy for her.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of her. And she gets to be like a big player in this. And she's the first like woman of color who's getting a big role in the Star Wars films. Like,
now we don't even have like a main trio anymore. We have a main quartet. That should be interesting.
I think that we've exhausted all of our thoughts on The Last Jedi.
It's an okay movie. It's a movie that exists. I'm not mad that it's a thing.
I kind of feel the same way about it that I feel about like some of the Marvel movies.
I love J.J. Abrams as far as Star Wars goes, but you know what we need? Taika Waititi, because he puts himself in all of his movies. So then we also get Taika Waititi in a Star Wars movie.
Taika Waititi would probably make himself as like a Hutt.
I'm not particularly excited for Solo, except for Donald Glover playing Lando.
I really want Maz to be in the Han Solo movie. So we wanted to tell you guys that since there won't be a Star Wars movie this December, we will not have a Star Wars movie next 20-minute video in 2019, January.
But we plan on doing another one this year for Solo.
Yes, and since it comes out in May, it will most likely come out in June or early July.
2019 is actually our 5-year anniversary on this channel, so we have some special things planned that we will talk about much closer to that. But we didn't want to leave you with nothing for January in 2019 as far as a movie review goes, because we do this every year. There are a couple Disney movies coming out in November and December, and as we get closer to November, we will probably post a poll or something to see what you guys would like us to talk about.
Whether you want that to be a 20-minute discussion.
We could just talk about all the Disney movies that come out between November and December.
Or we could watch a prequel.
So Sarah wants to torture us.
It sounds like the best course would just be to talk about all of them in a 20-minute video.
But we'll see what you guys would like to see come about November.
Yeah, so just be thinking about it.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up.
In the comments below, let us know what you thought about The Last Jedi.
If you're not already subscribed to The Princess and the Scrivener, please do so down below, especially if you'd like to see more videos on Disney, intersectional feminism, pop culture critiques, Star Wars, and more. The Scrivener will see you next week.